Welcome to the Economic Times Digital Payments Forum. Partnered with MasterCard, this initiative looks at how digitization and innovation will open the payments industry to new opportunities and push the country's financial inclusion drive. Thank you for joining us. Please extend a warm welcome to our eminent panel.
Hello there. Welcome to this roundtable on MSMEs in India, brought to you by the Economic Times and by MasterCard. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you to the discussion today. The topic is technology in small business, the path to sustained growth, and I'm really looking forward to a very cracking discussion today. I am Alokesh Bhattacharya, Senior Editor with the Economic Times, and I'm joined by my colleague Suchetna.
Hello everyone, I'm Suchetna Ray, Senior Assistant Editor with the Economic Times. Welcome to today's discussion. We will deliberate on the challenges facing small businesses and how technology can help them create a future of sustained growth. To that effect, welcome to all of you.
First, let's have a quick round of introductions. We have with us on the panel today Dr. K.P. Krishnan, the IEPF Chair Professor of NCAER. He was earlier the Secretary in the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. He has also served in several other central ministries, including Rural Development and Finance. We have with us Prakash Malia, Vice President and Managing Director, Sales, Marketing and Communications Group of Intel India. And we have Shashank Kumar, co-founder and CTO of Razorpay.
We also have with us Mr. R. Narayan, President, FICCI CMSME and founder and CEO of Power to SME Private Limited. Welcome, sir. Akhilesh Tuteja, Partner and Head, Digital Consulting, KPMG India. Welcome to you. And Sandeep Malhotra, Executive Vice President, Products and Innovation, Asia Pacific, MasterCard. Welcome to you too. So before we begin, a very short context setting is what Alokesh and I'll do. So we know that sustained growth for MSMEs is critical to India's overall economic growth as the economy seeks to recover from the devastating impact of COVID-19 that we've seen all around us and provide jobs to millions. It is the MSMEs who must form the bulwark of that plan. Famously, India's 63 million MSMEs contribute to 45% of industrial production, 95% of total industrial units, 40% of exports, and employ more than 120 million people, large chunks of which come from semi-urban and rural areas.
Also in this, there is a large share of MSMEs that belong to the services sector, which accounts for almost 55% of India's gross value added of more than 180 lakh crore rupees. In addition, typically capital cost per employee for MSMEs is lower than their larger counterparts. So any plan that seeks to take India's GDP growth into positive territory from where it is today, it must address the challenges that MSMEs face in terms of access to credit and also in terms of leveraging technology for growth.
Now, coming to the topic that we have at hand today, we have seen that accelerated digitalization has been the turning point and perhaps the biggest gain that the unprecedented times of COVID pandemic has thrust upon us. And MSMEs that have adapted to this shift have better chances of survival and growth. Unfortunately, almost 70% of MSMEs in India are still offline. And when we say offline, maybe they're online as far as submitting their returns are concerned, etc. But they are completely away from reaping the benefits of any sort of digitalization. Convincing them to go digital is a tough task simply because they have more immediate issues to address, such as business continuity challenges, compliances, and tax burdens, and unpredictable and shrinking cash flows.
Those are really tough challenges to look at, but still, a way must be found for them to reap the benefits of digital solutions such as cloud computing, robotic process automation, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and consumer analytics, simply because these tools can help them do business at lower cost, access more markets, and enable better customer experiences. The biggest barrier that they face, apart from the non-conviction of the need for high tech, is also the high cost of adoption of digital technologies.
And we've seen the government has been taking a lot of steps to boost tech adoption by MSMEs and even private companies, including Intel and Razorpay on our panel, are doing their part, but we still have a long way to go. A research report says that post COVID, India will need GDP growth of 8 to 8.5%, along with higher productivity and employment growth to create the 12 million non farm jobs annually till 2030. That's a target that we've set ourselves and which is much higher than what we would have achieved in recent times.
Now, how we can encourage MSMEs to adopt stronger technologies and how technology companies as well as the government can enable innovative and affordable solutions and methods to make this happen, that will be key to this effort. So to get a deeper understanding of the ground realities, I would now invite Akhilesh Tuteja of KPMG to give us a short talk on the perspectives surrounding technology and SMEs. Akhilesh, over to you.
Thank you, Allocation Suchetna, for that wonderful background, the opportunity which the SMEs have, and the challenges which they face. Based on the research KPMG has conducted over several years and the recent past, I would like to share a few things. But before I talk about some of these numbers and impact what it has, I want to share my personal perspective. My take is that there are three levelers in our business world. The first one is God, of course. The second one is a regulator, and third one is technology. And now I know that many of you can't control the first two, which is God and regulator. The one which is largely in your control and influence is technology. And that could be one of the ways for us to level the playing field. And technology really allows people to take a leapfrog compared to where they are. There couldn't have been a better time than today for MSMEs to take advantage of technology and really leapfrog, grow their businesses, increase their profitability, and also compete with some of these other players at a global scale. We have seen technology has played a pivotal role in our personal lives as well as in business lives at all time. But today's technology also has some significant advantages. I'll talk about some of those. One of the challenges most of the MSMEs have faced in the past is that the adoption of technology comes with some of these challenges which are hard to conquer. It's about having the access to capital, having the access to capability, and some of these big challenges. I would like to talk about the three significant technology development which are actually giving great advantage. And our research concludes that there are some of these advantages that SMEs can take even right now without having to take care of some of these big deals. With the inventions in cloud technology and the further development on what cloud can do at variabilizing the cost of doing work and creating almost no entry cost for any business to get on, the access to capital is no longer that big an issue as it used to be. The times are no longer for us to build monolithic, large-scale systems which require millions of dollars and crores of rupees to implement. Today's cloud technology can enable MSMEs to get on to the digitalization journey with almost no time, cost, and effort. The second big thing which MSMEs have struggled is to having access to high quality talent when it comes to technology and many other areas. Another advent in a low code or a no code technology is actually giving space for MSMEs to build systems and solutions without having to have an army of people to build those systems and code those things. So the impact of low code or no code technology is starting to occur now, and we believe that MSMEs will take a huge advantage of that. And then the third one is the significant advancements in data related machine learning technologies. Of course, broadly more known as artificial intelligence, but machine learning technologies using the power of data can really leapfrog these businesses to not only use technology to bring efficiencies, but also make decisions which could save lots and lots of money. Now, our report has indicated that there are several reasons because of which the MSMEs must get onto technology journey. But I would say in today's world, it no longer is a competitive advantage. It actually has become a reality or a survival toolkit. Advent of COVID also has forced many businesses to become digital, have contactless servicing and delivery of products. So technology is no longer a choice one has to make, but has to get on. Some of these findings indicate that by using technology, MSMEs can increase their share of revenue in double digits for sure. Another research which also talks about that the growth in profitability can be as high as twice of those people who continue to stay offline. So the businesses which go online increase their reach to customers beyond their geographies, have the likelihood of doubling their profit compared to their offline peers. And the third one is it's not just about money and it's not just about profit. It's also about having the ability to service customer at the fastest and in the closest manner. So these are the three things: increasing revenue, increasing profit much more substantially, and being more customer centric and being able to serve the customer are the three big findings. It could make a big improvement to the economy as well as to the MSME. Last point I will talk about, as Alokesh mentioned, that there is also a need for us to focus on job creation, employment, and other areas. There is a myth that sometimes technology kills job. Our study also indicated that more use of technology actually led for these companies to deploy more people. It's not that they're creating inefficiency, it's just that now they're deploying their manpower to do other kinds of things, do a lot more cognitive tasks, and also grow their businesses much beyond. So rather than using the manpower to do low-end work and routine work, now that manpower can be deployed and more people can be hired to grow the business in a similar way. Before I close on this segment, I would say that technology is a double-edged sword as well. So it's great, it can do wonders, but it also needs to be done in the right manner. There are certain challenges around that. It's either about issues relating to security and privacy, but more important issues that if you don't implement it in the right manner, we have also seen certain failures, and therefore it is important to do it right and do it right the first time. So those are some of those initial thoughts I have.
Thank you, Akhilesh. In fact, do it right the first time is so easy to say and so difficult to do, right? Because you get into a solution and then you find that it's not the right one for you, and that means a major overhaul and lots of extra investment, and everything goes haywire. I had read up, your report also, and I was like, just like you said, I was quite surprised by the fact that digitally enabled SMEs actually employ more people, than those who do not. I was quite interested in that viewpoint. Maybe we'll come back to you on that a little later. Suchetna.
Sure. Thank you, Alokesh, and thank you.
Akhilesh, you wanted to clarify something?
Yeah, I just thought it'd be a good idea for me to give some color to that finding. It's very interesting. So there are two parts to it. So part one is that you need less people for the same productive outcome. So the number of people required for the same turnover is less for sure. But what it allows the businesses to grow much more, and therefore you as one enterprise end up growing faster and deploying more people to do different kinds of tasks. So we looked at the average number of people employed for the size of the business. But you're right, productivity does take a huge upbeat, and you need less people. And in fact, the productivity improvement are more in all areas, not just in production operation. It's also in sales, service, and many other areas. But
Right.
the ability to scale is much faster.
Thank you, Mr. Sutejan. Thank you, Alokesh. So I think the time is now for us to dive straight into the panel discussion. We have decided to divide the discussion into three parts. First is where we will deliberate upon how technology can benefit SMBs. Then we move to specifics about the kind of technology that will benefit them. And finally, we'll discuss policy interventions required for the growth of MSME sector in India. So with that, let me start the panel discussion. My first question is to Dr. Krishnan. Sir, data shows that majority of Indian MSMEs are completely offline. What is really at the core of this problem? Do you think it's lack of skill, understanding of technology, lack of will, and how can they be persuaded to come online?
Thank you. Thanks, Suchetana. Let me first join Akhilesh in thanking Alokesh and you and ET for organizing this excellent roundtable. Clearly, this is a topic of great, I think, contemporary relevance. Akhilesh made some very interesting and important points. Sort of a partial response to the question that you asked. The question that I want to pose to myself and to all of us is something which Mr. Arun Mehra, for instance, long ago in one of the columns that he wrote for the ET had asked. In India, on a number of issues, we seem to know nearly perfect knowledge all of the problems in great detail. Very often, we also seem to know equally all of the solutions in great detail, and yet the solutions don't occur. So can we ponder a little and see why is it that this doesn't occur? For instance, from Akhilesh's point, my takeaway is there are a bunch of problems. There are a bunch of, today, inexpensive market solutions that are available. Now, Econ 101 tells me then the MSMEs should simply buy this technology because it's in their self-interest and adapt them. Now, why doesn't this happen? I think this doesn't happen because we need to go a little deeper into the data that you outlined at the very beginning. You spoke about the humongous number of MSMEs, the quantum, in terms of their contribution to the GDP, in terms of their contribution to the employment situation. But I think three things which stand out about MSMEs in India in particular, we need to take note of. They are all extremely small. In fact, I would prefer to use the phrase that Manish Sabarwal, for instance, uses. They are not small, they are actually dwarfs. They are, probably there is something which doesn't actually let them move away from being small, a large majority of them.
Mhm.
They are also institutions with very low measures on all the conventional productivity, return on capital, return on labor in the standard sense. And three, and I think the third is perhaps the reason for one and two above. Three, a large number of them are actually informal. And my reading is a lot of what technology offers, which will enable us to solve the problem of size and productivity, is unlikely to occur if we are not able to convert a large number of existing MSMEs, which are currently informal, into formal enterprises, and ensure that in future, and this is again the result of enormous research, enterprises that start formal typically tend to beat the first two problems. But enterprises that do not start formal need to be graduated into becoming formal, and then a whole bunch of other steps will follow. I'll stop here. There will be obviously natural questions on why are they not formal, but instead of monopolizing, since the idea is a conversation, let me stop here and let others jump in and sort of take this forward, and I'll be happy to come back and contribute to this. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnan. In fact, I'll take this question to Prakash from Intel. Converting the informal to formal, what sort of a role would a technology company have in that? If you are going to convince the sort of informal ones who are also large, to take more to technology and turn themselves into formal organizations. It's not only about the adoption of technology. To become formal, there are a lot of other, formalities involved, right? But apart from converting those who are not online and making them online, how do you also give us some insight into how you could also take those who are already online to the next level of digital, right? So how do we try and take this whole small and medium business category into a higher level of digital and therefore higher growth in the way that Akhilesh was mentioning?
Sure. Yeah, first of all, thank you, Alokesh and Suchetra, for having all of us on this panel. It's great to be here, and hello and happy new year to all of you as well as our audience. I think SME is not a very straight answer, is what I gather based on all the experience we have had engaging in this segment, because it's a large segment, and Doctor made some very, very good points. So did Akhilesh in terms of where the current state is. And I will add a bit more to the mix before answering your question, Alokesh, specifically. Outside of the fact that technology can play a very critical role, you have to admit the fact that, and NASSCOM study also proves that there is a deep impact on SMEs in India because of COVID. It talks about the proportion of GDP contributed by SMEs went from 34% in 2019 to 28% in 2020. So there is an impact. And the reason I believe there is an impact is exactly what Dr. also mentioned, and Akhilesh also talked about, the lack of adoption of technology. And fact remains that aside from all the points being made, the one thing that the SMEs will have to take care of is that we are in one of the youngest countries in the world. And all the customers and downstream partners they are dealing with are most times digital natives. So they are not dealing with offline customers. They are most times dealing with very savvy digital natives. So the need to transform is very, very important. And we have, for the last 2.5 to 3 years, been engaged on CII along with industry consortium on an initiative called Tech Suction to essentially pave the journey for SMEs to adopt technology based on all the rationale and logic that comes about here as well as globally in India. And what we have realized is, one, there is a fear of adoption of technology that we need to circumvent. The second is the ROI implementation. I'm sorry, I'm in a room which is gesture controlled. Talk about smart rooms. So the second aspect of, yeah, I don't have a justification or ROI is very, very critical as well to assess. So the initiatives, public-private initiatives like Tech Saksham, we have been able to reach SMEs to make a justification. So that's the first answer to your question, saying what could we do? The public and private collaboration to make an argument to SMEs on why technology is important, very, very important. The second part of it is, once you get online, how can you go move to the next stage? There are several ways of doing it. You have to look at people, process, and technology comes as an enabler. Raising the bar on skilling for your people is the first step. And then you talk about various solutions and initiatives, whether it's digital or social media marketing to reach your digital native customers, or whether it's automating all your systems and processes based on digitization that has already happened, whether it's payments or whether it's other elements that is front runner in terms of capability that India presents itself. So those are a couple of areas. But that being said, right up front, I mentioned that it's very complex. It's not a very simple solution because there are, in the 50, 60 million SMEs, there are various kinds. There are formal and informal and various sizes. So one size will not fit all.
Right. With that, I'll come to Mr. Kumar. Razorpay has built this platform where a non-collateral based financing process has been used to revamp the traditional processes to bridge the credit problem that MSMEs have. Now, when you lend to small businesses, do you think that investment in technology is perhaps taking a backseat because they're preoccupied with the now of the business and not so much with the future of the business?
Hey, Suchitana, thanks for inviting me to the panel, and hello to everyone. I think Steven made the point before, right, around the digitization that is happening and how it is beneficial for the SMEs, right? Today, what you see, or at least on the ground, right, that when we are talking to these SMEs, is that all of them are fairly intelligent, right? I think the pandemic has forced a lot of SMEs to explore digital solutions, right? But what we find today, at least, that the solutions that are being built, it's at least not being built with Indian SMEs in mind. There are not enough inexpensive and really good solutions, technical solutions out there that the SMEs can actually adopt. We talk about credit at every point, for example, but if you look at the credit industry, it still functions in a very old traditional manner where you rely on balance sheets and you rely on credit scores for underwriting. And we know that for businesses, for most SMEs, right, credit score is non-existent. And the public profiles of these businesses are, the balance sheet and all, it's not something that the banks can truly trust. And that is where we come in with the picture that, if you're using the digital solutions that we are providing, then you are getting real benefit out of it. You are able to build your public profile. You are able to build your score with us. And on that basis, we can give you uncollateralized loans that are there. And with that kind of benefit, with that kind of value add, then the businesses are able to understand and also adopt digital solutions. I'll also say that the age of building one size fits all, it's completely gone. Right? You need to build way more personalized and targeted solutions that is there. So even the SME industry is so diverse and so huge. You need to look at very differently of the SMEs which exist in a tier 1 city versus a tier 2 city. SMEs which are operating online versus SMEs which are operating in as a kirana shops or as a gym studio, right? And all those sectors also, you have to think through what kind of solution actually is going to fit for them. I'll make an additional point, right? While a lot of us have been trying to talk about the benefits of digital, but how much of that information is actually truly reaching on the ground? Because nobody is going and sitting and explaining to these SMEs that what are the benefits that these digital tools are actually going to provide to you. When do you have that session where say, okay, I mean, this is a proof point, this is a success story that is there in the industry, because everyone talks about that digitization is good for you, but for a business that is there, if you look at the life cycle of a business, they have to get customers, they have to worry about getting payment from those customers, they have to file their taxes, they have to pay their vendors, they have to make payroll. And today, all of these things are in some sense manual in nature. And they have to rely on a bunch of vendors, a bunch of people to get these things done. And these relationships have been built over time, over a period of a decade or 2 decades. And they rely on these things because there's a lot of trust. Now, if you have to replace that trust, if you have to replace those relationships with digital tools, you have to take care of that whole ecosystem and show them the benefits as well, to kind of complete the whole story and also ensure that that information is reaching on the ground.
Shashank, collateral-free loans has been sort of an idea for quite some time, and most banks, run away from it, which is normal. But does it not pose a risk to you either? Does it not raise the specter of higher NPAs and more defaults and all? How do you actually give collateral-free loans to a small company that is probably in the informal economy?
See, I'll tell you, right? The traditional way of lending that is there, it has a high cost of customer acquisition, and it relies on the model that, you are very near to the customer and you have access to, let's say, some sort of collateral that is there. And then you are banking on the fact that, the customer will behave in a good way, in a way, right? But that model is completely going to change. Today, at least in this century and in the age that we are going in a mobile first, cloud first world, there's a lot of points that a business is generating just by virtue of operating their business. And we collect thousands of those data points, right? We have businesses of vintage of 6+ months, 1+ months, 5+ years that are there who have been on the platform, and we have been observing their operations day in, day out for so long time. And we can build these models, and you don't even need to go to like a high-end AI model, right? You can even build very simple statistical model with very high confidence to say that, okay, these businesses are genuine and they are not going to run away because, this is their daily livelihood. Then the only question that remains for us is, okay, if we are going to give uncollateralized loans to them, then what is the right amount that they can digest and they can use sensibly? It should not be such a high amount that it creates negative incentives for them and they put the money to bad use. But at the end of the day, if you are giving money to honest businesses, you have to observe what the industry is doing. You have to observe what the business is doing. But if you know that the business is journeying, if they have been operating with you, and if you have thousands of data points available, then you don't really need a security deposit to give that loan. At the end of the day, I mean, if the business is going to run away, then truly, to be truly honest, none of us have the capability to go after that and get that security that is there with them, fight the court case, get the property that is there. And that is the reason that a lot of banks actually go for large corporates, because then they can devote their resources in one place instead of distributing it over 1 lakh SMEs and plus that is there, right? So the way of lending, at least what I believe in next 5 years, the cost of lending is going to go significantly down. We need to bring in a lot of policy changes to enable digitization of lending instead of doing the manual paperwork that is there. And then we need to wholesale shift from the traditional lending model to a cash flow based lending model where you get higher amount of loans as your business grows and you have good behavior. You are depicting good behavior in the ecosystem that is there. And for that, we may need to revamp our credit industry or credit policy. But yeah, that's truly the direction.
Yeah, good points you make, and of course there are counter arguments to all. But Sandeep, in fact, I was going to come to you only after this.
I can give an example to something Shashank was talking about, something we're doing in Kenya. But I think the whole thing about alternative data points and how you basically utilize those data points in absence of a credit scoring system or a credit scoring agency in a country, you could actually use those data points to extend credit. So an example of that is, while you may not have a credit scoring system in a country, you could have your bank statement. The bank statement will tell you how much money you have into your bank account in that year, how much money do you have out, and how good you have been in terms of paying your rental payments, your short-term loan payments, which may not be a part of the scoring system. Something we're trying to do in Kenya a program called, Track Microcredit Program. What we do is we basically look at the small business interacting with the FMCG, like a Unilever. So they do transactional activity with Unilever. You take that data and then you give it to the financial institution. The financial institution will lend. So it may not be the actual data point which you would get from a credit scoring system, but you do these transactional activities, account statements, short-term loans, rental payments, and utilize that for basically making working capital accessible.
Right. So just to add to that, Sandeep, apart from when you're like your MasterCard, right? You help transactions become easier. You provide access to digital platforms and all. But beyond ease of transactions, right? Digital makes transactions easier. I consider. I don't know last when I went to the bank branch, right? Must be the same for practically all of us over here. But beyond ease of transactions, how can digital payments help SMEs, in their growth sort of story?
Yeah. See, number one thing is, what is the role of an SME? The SME's role is to serve the consumer. Consumer is changing. If you look at, there are three big trends going on today, which the consumer is following. Number one is there is a touchless environment. People are becoming very hygiene, conscious, washing their hands, not going to a mall because of restriction or whatever, or not going to a restaurant or a pub or a movie theater. So touchless is the new norm, which means people are sitting at their couch or side of the bed and ordering things online. So that trend is here to stay, and 3/4 of people are staying. Even if the pandemic goes away, that will stay. The second is cashless. ATM withdrawals are at an all-time low around the world. People are not touching cash for whatever reason, and that's a very key thing. People in UK are living on 60 pounds for like 3 months, 60 pounds worth of cash, so literally bills. And then the third thing is contactless. So contactless is tap and go. So we used to see 30% of all card transactions be digital, being contactless, being tap and go last year. It's become 41% in a matter of 10 months. And that's happening around the world. India used to see 3% transactions contactless. It's now mid-teens, basically. So that trend is also not going to go away. So what we are seeing is that it's the ease and this less is more, kind of an environment is here to say. Then the SMEs have to adjust to that. So what do they need to adjust to that is, because it's becoming touchless, because it's contactless, you must have a digital presence. It just is a given. You can't just be a brick and mortar store, and online is an afterthought. You must have a digital presence, which allows you to order online for the consumer and ship to home, or order online and pick up at store, or order online but return in store. I mean, this omni-channel thing is a given. If you don't have that, it's a very tough thing for the business, right? So that's an important thing. And then the second one is you must adopt contactless payments. Now, what are you going to do about this? You must, use these new innovative methods, where Shashank and the other guys are in the payment industry are launching, that you don't need to invest in a $500 device to accept a contactless card. You can bring your own Android phone and accept payments on that. So somebody can scan a QR code, or somebody can tap on your own Android phone and make it happen. So those are the innovations which are happening. And then the third part is you need to make these small business aware that these technologies happen, and you don't need to, know how to learn Java code or Python coding to do all that. How do you do that in a very, very succinct way and simple way, and make your business basically much more profitable than it was before? So those are the key things which we are working on closely along with the CII and many other entities.
Mm-hmm. Before I go to Mr. Narayan, quickly, Mr. Malia wanted to say something. You've raised your hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to make a point to what Sandeep and Shashank also mentioned, right? To Alokesh's question on how can digital payments help the SMEs. I'll give you a couple of data points. Number one, the festive sales that happened online last year, right? Both Amazon and Flipkart came out with data points. Within 48 hours of going live, Amazon had sold or got orders from 98.4% of the postal codes in India.
Yeah.
Just think about that for a moment. It is incredible reach. Mm-hmm. And second data point is based on Swiggy and all the other delivery engines for restaurants. The difference between which restaurants really thrived and which really got challenged was whether they had digital strategies right up front. So those are two elements, and they are almost always connected to digital payments. If you could connect digital payments to your service, you could sell to any postal code in the country today as an SME. Very, very powerful, very different from how SME business used to be in the past.
Right. Mr. Tuteja, I'll come to you, but before that, I'll go to Mr. Narayan. I'll take points made by all of you and come to my question. See, Mr. Kumar said that we need Indian solutions for Indian MSMEs. Mr. Malhotra spoke about the need to digitize to harness the opportunities that are there around. But Mr. Narayan, when you interact with the small businesses, what do you think? Are these opportunities that the SMBs look at and they think that they should be adopting technology at a higher rate, at a higher speed? Or these are not even considerations? Because as Dr. Krishnan said, the biggest problem is formalization.
Yeah. So, just to bring a little color into that, on some of the MSME stats that you were mentioning. So if you look at, the GDP contribution of MSMEs, country-wise, if you go to most developed countries, you'll see that MSME contribution of the GDP is anything between 63 to 75%. And as somebody mentioned here, it was 34, and Mr. Malia, I think, mentioned that it was 34 and it's come down to 29, right? So that gives you the huge headroom for growth and for becoming a defragmented economy. India is still in a state where it's not completely defragmented. The top 400 accounts or 500 accounts in the country do a large amount of business, and possibly close to 80% of the bank loans are also with these customers, right? Now, that being said, I'll come back to the point that Dr. Krishnan was saying that, informal and formal, etc. I mean, when we look at the MSME space, we a lot of us think startup and other things, but when we interact with this MSME space, one of the key things that we see is these are people who are forced to, because of become an MSME because of lack of employment, lack of employability, and all of those things. And they're not coming into the MSME as a charismatic leader. They're coming in there to put food on the table and survive, right? And therefore, the reluctance to look ahead and say that, do I want to challenge the food on the table and to get more food on the table, or just be content with that kind of stuff? The other point I also wanted to make is in terms of technology, in terms of adoption. I mean, we can talk ERP and we can talk CRM and digital, etc. But if you look at your own life, and look at the number of vendors who have served you in your home state in the last 10 to 12 months, all of them used to be people who used to walk across and buy stuff and pay them in cash. And today, I think in the last 10 months, at least 9 months, you have not seen any of them. They have digitally enabled themselves using whatever tools possible. They went to come into contactless delivery, and they're leaving stuff outside your gate, not worrying about payments. So they've become digitally enabled even in terms of payments, etc. Right? And that's more applicable in the micro range of things. Right? But when I look at my own business, when I look at our membership panel, etc., if I see the digital payment conditions, right? I mean, the amount of payment instruments that have actually moved from checks to NEFTs and NASHs and RTGS, it's been a phenomenal change. So what I want to say is that the MSMEs, today they realize that what you need to worry about is the MSMEs who are below the GST barrier. People who are in the GST barrier are now understanding their digital footprint that they're leaving on the business, right? So today, if you've done any business last month, this month, if your GST invoices are not filed, everybody knows where you are, and they start messaging you. A bank loan today in 30 days declares you an SMA. So that digital adoption in the mid micro space or mid segment has come quite a bit. So the whole idea is, it is pointless to debate whether it's an Indian-made service or an Indian-made tool, etc. What I find in the MSME segment, especially the progressive segment, is they are able to go out there and dig out what is good for them, kind of stuff. Now, if you look at a bunch of enterprises, right? So what is happening is in the enterprise space, they are saying that I need somebody to deal with my vendors. I no longer want to deal with 400 vendors. So what they are either doing is they are putting up a digital front through which all these 400, 500 vendors have to deal with them, or they're putting up an aggregator. And I've seen in the space that many MSMEs who did not have a digital footprint are being forced to adopt the digital footprint to integrate with their and continue supplying to their enterprise customer. So the tide is changing.
So you mean to say, because of COVID, what began as a pursuit just for survival will now accelerate the adoption of technology among the small businesses and
absolutely, and because across the spectrum, everybody is changing their use of technology. And if I, as a big guy, start using technology to interact with my vendors down the road are slowly forced the same way.
Is that a good thing? No, that is the cascading effect that we want to see, isn't it? From an economic perspective,
irreversible tide, and it's happening. So it's not doom and gloom, and it is happening. Is what the point I wanted to make.
Mr. Tuteja wants to make a point as well.
I wanted to come in for the point which I think Alokesh asked a question about what's the value of digital payment beyond just creating the convenience in others. I actually add two additional points to what's been discussed so far. The first one is about trust. We'll all agree that businesses depend significantly on trust, and the MSMEs are more so than others. I think the ability with which the digital payments, and particularly digital payments, can enhance the trust in the ecosystem is unparalleled. Many other payment channels have been fraught with the risk of mistrust, because you present an instrument, you don't know whether it is right, wrong, and that's why it created some of these wrong habits of creating inefficient financial instruments. So to me, digital payment is one of the significant capability to drive trust in the ecosystem, which has unprecedented and unparalleled capabilities to grow the business. The second one, while we're looking at the convenience part of it, but there's another very important part which the efficiency of the payment processing brings in. And let me take the analogy of the airline industry. Many of you would realize that the airline industry thrives on the efficiency of how many hours you can keep the plane up in the air. The longer the plane is on the ground, is actually losing cash, and because there's a huge cost of capital. Now, we do that for an airline industry a lot more than we possibly do that for a transport fleet of a car or something, because airplanes are more expensive and we want that asset to sweat the most. Now, in that comparison between a car and an airplane, how expensive is cash as an asset not to sweat? So every single second, and I don't mean hours, days, and weeks, which you used to take, every single asset, the cash is not being utilized, but is actually in the process between a sender and a receiver, is actually a loss of productivity on the cash. So what the digital payment has done is that they have actually increased the number of turns the same amount of cash can make, and make it more productive. So imagine an MSME who received the payment yesterday and was supposed to receive yesterday, actually did not receive it today. That's a 24 hours of productivity loss on that capital, on that cash. What the digital payment are allowing is that they are almost making the cash sweat 100%. So the productivity on the cash is another big factor, which is improving the economy and the businesses as such.
And on that point, I think there is a cost of cash, and that's somewhere between 1% to 2%, right? You have to print the money, then you have to transport that money, then you have to put it in a vault, and then there's pilferage, and then there are bad notes and all that. That's somewhere between 1% to 2%. And there is a slightly dated study, but 10% increase in electronic payments or digital payments yields to close to 1% increase in GDP. So that's how a country generally becomes prosperous, by introducing more digital payment. And obviously transparency and all those other things come in.
I'm sure, Satya, there's a bigger benefit. I was only referring to MSME, but if you look at bigger benefit, I think it's a health benefit not to have so much cash. So I think who wants to deal with so much cash? So there are enormous benefits.
Yeah, I mean, I presume that you're talking about cash in real, currency terms, and not digital cash, but because digital payments have made the handling of cash easier. But I want to just round off this part of the discussion with Dr. Krishnan and come back to the point that you initially raised about, the large part of this being the informal economy, and how do we first convert them into formal, and what is your view around, technology helping companies turning informal into formal? I think government has also taken several steps to make that happen. But at the same time, do the MSMEs really have the money to, do this kind of shift? Your views around this?
I would, in sort of round one on this formalization, I think the onus is less on technology, less on MSMEs. I think the onus is much more on the state. This is something, this number has almost become legend. to start a business in India today, and we are now confining ourselves to an average MSME, technically there are 58,172 compliances. Now, the updates on this, and this is something I have calculated. I mentioned to you earlier before this panel started. I headed a national task force on MSMEs, and we presented this report to Mr. Gadkari. And currently, we are in the process of working with the government of Punjab on actually implementing some of the MSME task force recommendations. The updates on these 58,172 compliances, meaning changes that take place, amendments that come through, has, we calculated it, 3,516 per annum. Now, the MSMEs that we are talking about, all of us, which have moved away from non-digital to digital, etc. Now, a bulk of them actually have compliance teams, maybe a small company secretary, a chartered accountant, a bunch of people who help them do all this. But I think what we should worry about even more, 14% of these compliances that I referred to, it's a little over 14%, carry imprisonment of between 3 months to 10 years. Now, many of you will not be aware of an India pre-1991 when, if you produced more than your licensed capacity, under the Industries Development Regulation Act, you could be sent to jail. Companies have actually been prosecuted for producing more than what they were meant to produce. And we thought we got rid of all of that in 1991. Hello, we haven't. And we haven't got rid of them for the most vulnerable part of India's economy, namely the MSMEs. And on an average, and I will stop with this, the throwing of numbers, the MSME factory must file for 23 plus registrations and licenses, 750 plus compliances, and 152 filings per annum, and labor regulations, and this is the strangest part, account for 51% of these. Now, the strange situation is labor continues to be hugely exploited. MSMEs are crushed under the burden of compliances. So the larger objective for which we created these compliances aren't getting fulfilled. The MSMEs continue to be burdened. And you have a lot of the problems that we spoke about in the context of MSME. So I think, to come back to your question very sharply, technology clearly plays a role. And I think that role that technology will play after we clean out. And as we speak, we are in the process of cleaning this out in Punjab. And what is level one? Level one, close to 73% of labor compliances are duplicates because they have been written up in different legislations at different points in time. Some are state, some are center. So as an MSME, I'm filing the same data, but in a different form, in a different sort of abstract to different government authorities. So clearly, we need to clean up on the legislative front. But having done that, I think technology comes in very majorly by government creating platforms for these compliances. Because a lot of these are actually information that you need to file. Information that you need to file can be handled exactly by what we are talking about. Labor compliances, EHS filings, that is environment, health and safety filings, tax filings, central inspection, sort of inspection systems and single window clearances. And we are currently working with the government of Punjab on, they have an act of 2018 called some transparency. It's a long PDSTPA act and an enabling of business act, under which we are trying to figure out, can you bring all of these into one platform? Because if I'm an MSME, For me, there is one big dada called government. Now, you call him Labor Department, you call him GST, you call him factories, you call him XYZ. Get me one compliance platform, get me one compliance digital app, and I'm more than happy to comply. So technology comes in, but I think in terms of sequencing, I think the role of the state in making a lot of these easier, followed by technology, is where I would go. Thanks.
Right. There's something that you remember the ease of doing business report that the World Bank comes out with in 2017 pointed out that in Maharashtra the number of permissions that you take had gone down to 23. That got somebody to write a letter to Economic Times asking that he's coming from Singapore, actually, incidentally, and he was trying to set up a business in Maharashtra, and he's filed for 23 permissions for the land. Forget the environment, forget the water, and the other things, that other permissions that you need to set up even a business. With that, we'll come to the second part of this discussion, where we speak about what kind of technologies that small business should be looking at. And Dr. Krishnan, you've actually set the mode for that question, for that discussion to start. I'll begin with Mr. Malia. So, which are the tech tools that can actually help small businesses reduce cost of operations, cost of customer acquisition? Which are these tools? I mean, obviously, there's cloud and internet are the two obvious names that can be best leveraged, but specifically.
Yeah, I believe the approach that is needed is look at it from customer first point of view, because you're, as an SME, serving a customer, and that customer needs to be served the most efficient way, the most innovative ways. And that's how you walk back to the organization on what tools are needed. Specifically, first thing to remember for any SME is that technology per se is not expensive anymore. The move to cloud makes the move from CapEx to OpEx-based model. So all the solutions that you talk about are operating on pay-per-use approach, whether it's setting up a website, whether it is customer relationship management tool, which is needed, whether it's digital tools on social media, all of these are on a cloud pay-per-use model. The second aspect that SMEs need to consider is when they look at the automation bit, they should not look at automation of whether it's digital interaction with customers or whether it is supply chain interaction with vendors. They should also look at it from an employee perspective. And up-leveling the employee skill is super important, because that's the only way where the employees can really stay the course on where the company or SME is headed in the new environment. And COVID has exposed us to new working environment. Everybody is remote, and some of those changes will be permanent. So how do you make sure through inexpensive courses? Again, these courses are not expensive, whether it's Udemy, whether it's Academy, whether it's Coursera. These are very affordable courses to really upskill the employees. The third aspect of tools would be integrating what Shashank also mentioned is India-specific automation engines, whether it's digital payments, whether it's Aadhaar-enabled services, whether it is other aspects, including GST. If integration of some of these basic elements would give you a very clean accounting mechanism, which you can automate through tools. It has very good set of interaction and frictionless interaction with your customers, making it customer first. And last but not the least, you will be far more efficient and far more predictive in terms of responding to customer needs. The last point I will make is across everything, one of the biggest tools that SMEs need to invest in is security related tools, because everything, the more you digitize, the more technology you use, the more data that you are having within your premises. Security of that data and privacy of that data in the technology world is very, very important. That's one of the other tool or aspects that SMEs need to consider.
Great, thanks. And Shashank, you're the other tech company, and you're a young company that's into a lot of innovative stuff. So tell us a little bit about affordable innovations that are happening, and what sort of innovations do you think? Of course, like Prakash said, you have to look at your business and you have to understand your customer, and the way you would approach a customer through technology 5 years ago is different from this in the same context of the problem. problem statement, if the problem statement 5 years ago was solved by X, the same problem statement being solved today by technology might be slightly different, right? So what are the innovative ways in which technology can help SMEs? Shashank.
Yeah, I think for any business that is there, I mean, customers are the most important element. You're always looking at having better interactions with your customers, getting more customers, and increasing your mind share with them, right? And what we have observed, in a way, pandemic forced the acceleration of offline to online trend that has been going on since a very long time, right? So for any SME today, which is especially retail facing, that is there, right? They should look at establishing their digital presence, whether it is through a simple website or even managing your presence online through something like Google Maps or something else that is there. That is paramount, right? Second is establishing digital channels of communication with the customer, right? And that can be very simple. That can be, say, through WhatsApp, that is there, right? Or that can be through simple tools like Khatabook and OK Credit that are coming up, right? But if you're able to establish a channel of communication with your customer where you don't need to be physically present with them, then just the fact that you have a relationship with them, the value of it increases multifold, right? And you cannot put a price to it in a simple way, right? Third, I would say establishing the convenience factor with the customer, right? If and whenever they are willing to transact, right, you need to ensure that you are providing good the payment options that can be paid by them at the point of transaction, even if they are sitting at home or anywhere that is there, they're able to complete that transaction, right? And today there are enough logistical tools that are available that you can look at any kind of home delivery that is there or any kind of digital delivery that is there, different kind of things that's there. So that's pretty much from a customer perspective that is there. Second perspective that I can give is on the backend side, because as a business, you have a lot of backend operations on a day-to-day basis, right? So the main thing that you should look at is, where is your most time going, right? Because these backend operations consume a lot of time, but don't give as much value towards growing your business, right? So different things like from payroll to compliances to taxation, all of these are areas where you can cut down a lot of time through the digital tools that are there, and then also bring a lot more efficiency and cost optimization for running your business, right? So for all these areas, you get tools for digital tax filing, right? You get tools for running payroll. Today, I mean, I am a founder, and in 2014, 15, 16, 17, we used to run our payroll manually and used to take almost 4 to 5 hours every month for me to do that, right? And I'm pretty technically savvy. Then it used to be like that. For most businesses, it will be much more, right? Today we have tools available. We also provide a payroll tool where it is literally a one-click process, and the value of that time cannot be stated, right? And so the return that you get on a time saved is multifold. And I can be on vacation. Earlier, I need to carry my laptop to make log into my bank to make that payment. Now I don't need to, right? All of these are scheduled. All of these are done automatically, and I can have my peace of mind. Similarly, for vendor payments, for example, that is there, right? So most SMEs, again, I'll make a point that, again, not enough good tools are available for these things, right? Most SMEs have very difficulty tracking their vendors and how much they are paying them, right? To the tune that they don't know whether they are overpaying or whether there are optimization opportunities that it's more of a gut feel that is there, right? So bringing it to some digital gives you a very good view, very transparent view as to, which vendors are really good for you, provide you material on time and provide you return on time. And then, you can go for further optimization and save cost there. So that is the ranking order from my side and, the suggestions that are there.
I'll come to you, Mr. Malhotra. Mr. Kumar laid out his ranking order: vendor management, payment, where you see time being saved as well as efficiency being enhanced. So there is a program that you run with CII in India. It's called Digital Saksham program. What has been your takeaways through that program that you've interacted with MSMEs? What do you think are the innovations that they require that they would do better with?
Yeah, so generally, so we'll come to the digital section, but so what we are trying to do is, what is the need of the SME today, right? So serving the customer, one is to keep the lights on. So when pandemic happened, I don't think anybody was worried about profitability. They were more worried about survival. How do I survive? How do I serve the customer? If I'm a brick and mortar store who basically did all the business on a paper register, how do I basically make sure that I can accept orders in a non-face-to-face fashion where I need a digital storefront? I need to be able to list my items, consumer can order, and I should be able to accept payments. If I can't accept payments in an online way, maybe when the delivery happens, I should be able to accept payments, maybe do more pay on delivery rather than cash on delivery, because nobody wanted to touch cash and touch each other. So that is number one. How do you do survival in terms of storefront, order, payments, evolving into inventory management, cash register, and the likes of all that? So bunch of tools around that, good, bad, ugly. Second is, how do you engage the consumer, right? So you want that same consumer to come back to you. So how do you engage with them, which is primarily, using marketing abilities through social media tools which are available. You also can engage with them in terms of, okay, I'll give you discount and offers, and I'll sell you gift cards for 10% off. I will also maybe, remind you that you have items left in the cart. Please come back and finish the order. So you can create a very nice, kind of engagement with that, reviews, feedback, all that nice stuff. And then the third thing is, once you become all that, where you actually are able to serve the consumer, are able to bring that consumer back to the digital, then you get into the next stage, which Shashank was talking about, where how do you create operating efficiency in your system where you move from a paper register to electronic register? You basically do a account receivable and account payable. We partner with entities like Zoho of the world, who have done this in a fairly advanced fashion. So how do you, electronize that part of the business, the whole bookkeeping, the account keeping, payroll management, tax management. So you all into that, and then you get into much more other richer things about employee collaboration. Are you coming to work, or I'm taking a break, and do it in a more electronic fashion. So that's one. Then we're getting into things like electronic education, where we are talking about financial literacy, which is what we're trying to do with the digital section of the world. How do you bring that digital literacy to the person? It's not the 6 people who know technology or who are on this call. How do you bring in to the women entrepreneurs, something which we've launched as a part of what we call Project Kirana, where we are introducing empowerment of digital, empowerment of women entrepreneurs through these programs to teach them what this means to you. What does digital identity mean to you? How can you be a part of the formal SME system or a formal financial system, and then basically be a profitable business once you've gone through the survival mode? So that's the multiple things which we're trying to do through these programs, bringing in literacy, bringing in tools, bringing in technology in a fashion which is very, very convenient. And it's not for only tech-savvy people, but for the people who are a common man or a common woman who wants to earn their living.
Right. There's a lot of interesting thoughts, Sandeep, in your talk. I'll come to Mr. Narayan, and basically, do you handle a lot of MSME, right, in your work? Do you get the feeling that we are getting a little ahead of ourselves in terms of what technologies to be used, when we have some 58,700 something compliances to address, and the state has to come in first and of course reduce them, and then the technology platforms need to come in? Is it like, it seems to me like a horrifically large problem that will take forever? Do you see any progress and in terms of movement in this?
When you talk about the 58,716, assuming I've got the number right, number of compliances.
You have fantastic memory. I forgot the exact number.
So, they've been living with it. It's only becoming better day in, day out, right? And it's the numbers are reducing as we talk, kind of stuff. And so if you look at the state of the complexity as far as the SME is concerned, he is quite up to there doing this for the last 5 years, and he does it as a part of his existence right now. We can make it better for him. There's no two ways about that. But I think we are making it better. We're making strides in ease of doing business kind of stuff. So yeah, but at the same time, I don't think we can belittle the requirement of technology in running the SME's life today, saying that there are other problems we can take care of, right? So what, in my personal capacity, I'm dealing with more than 5,000 SMEs. At FICCI, we're dealing with, maybe 5 lakh SMEs kind of stuff. So what we did is we put together a toolkit for these SMEs, and how to make them a little more technology savvy and a little more technology friendly, if not completely adaptive kind of stuff. So the way we focused on it is, let's look at ops. And when I say ops, we're looking at customer relation, financial management, marketing, supply chain, product innovation, all of that kind of stuff. And saying that where can digital help you? Where can technology help you in each of these processes? And that's one stack we're talking to them about. The second stack we're talking to them about is the infra stack, saying that, what should be smartphone enabled, what should be low cost technology enabled, and all of that stuff. And, like somebody else, not build monolith systems kind of stuff, but, pay as you pay, as Mr. Malia was also saying, pay as you use kind of, make them aware of what is available kind of stuff. So that's what we're doing on the infra side of the thing. We're talking to them very heavily about enterprise extranets. So what happens is, don't build the technology yourself, latch on to your enterprise customers and go and build your ecosystem into the extranet, so that you're not building quotations separately. You're actually a part of the system, and you're doing stuff very, very closely with your suppliers. It gets you closer to your customer data. Right?
You have to join a lot of extranets.
So you see, an SME typically will survive on 7, 10, 12 large customers that he has, right? So if you get hooked on, it's almost like getting married to each of these enterprises when you get into the extranet. The cost of removing you is also difficult. The cost of you going away is also difficult. So it creates a nice marriage for you, between you and your customer. So getting in the extranet gives you a lot of comfort in for an SME as far as he's concerned. So we're focusing on that a bit of it. The last part we are talking about is data, and we've broken this data into two sides, which is, data security, as Malaya talked about. I'm not going to dwell on that. There are enough experts who can talk on that subject. But using data in a format where it is available for you to make quick decisions kind of stuff. I mean, today, if you look at all the enterprises, etc., who are working with SMEs, they actually started working on e-auctions and all of that stuff. If you don't have data at your fingertips at that point of time, when you're sitting in an e-auction, you can't falter. If you falter for 2 minutes, the order is gone, kind of stuff. So we're talking about getting the data in place, working for them as and when it is available. And the last bit.
So is it too much to say that they should also be looking at digital marketing? Is it like too far ahead?
No. So I'm just coming back to that. So see, in digital marketing, before that, the last piece that I wanted to talk to you about is customer satisfaction. So do everything that makes the customer want to come back to you again and again. Mm-hmm. So, in the SME space, the MSME space, a large, the mid-sized portion is largely a business to business relationship rather than a business to consumer relationship. Mm-hmm. There, we actually broke it into two halves. And we said that in the business to business space, you can learn to digitize yourself, you can give yourself time. But in the business to consumer space, you just have to jump onto the bandwagon. And there are plenty of bandwagons out there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So that's how we're doing this entire toolkit for these MSMEs from FICCI's CMSME side.
Right. Mr. Tuteja hasn't spoken for a very long time. This is a question that I want to ask both Mr. Narayan and Mr. Tuteja. I'll go to Mr. Tuteja first. We spoke about customer satisfaction, keeping in mind that a large section of MSMEs in India are B2B. So how can the small businesses actually harness this tool better for future growth, for their better prospects?
Yeah, I think one of the aspects which is spoken about by many of my co-panelists today is that the solutions are not so generic. There is a sense of the industry which you're part of, because each industry has its own nuances. Even within the B2B segment, if you are a provider of small components to a large OEM, you have very little power left versus you are a significant provider to a fewer number of OEMs. So I think there are different levers which come into the play with respect to the business. Specifically talking about the influencing the voice of customer or looking at in the customer satisfaction range, there are many ways by which the technology can help the MSMEs to figure out what's going on. So there are many other factors by which one has to first determine what does success look like in this relationship. Is it that somebody paying me on time is a happy customer, or is somebody who's giving me a larger share of business is a happy customer? Because typically no one large B2B buyer would be dependent on only one or limited number of providers. So using some of these extranets, which Mr. Narayan talked about, is one of the ways by which you can actually determine how significant you are to the ecosystem of your B2B buyers. The second way to look at is the ability to continue to grow market share within the same segment. So, for example, you might be one of the few players which you provide, but what is your ability to grow your market share with respect to your competition could be another area. Of course, one of the things which has a softer factor, which actually helps increase the customer satisfaction, even for B2B customer today, is convenience and efficiency. Like the smaller players, let's say, for example, if I'm an MSME and I'm supplying to another MSME, I think the challenges could be multifold. But if I'm an MSME supplying to a large enterprise and a large customer, I think amongst everything else, the convenience, timeliness, commitment take much bigger stage compared to just, are you the cheapest? Because I think they have many other ways to drive productivity. So in my view, using technology to do three things is very important. The first one, do you have the technology which provides visibility? Mr. Narayanan talked about this thing saying, do you have data on your fingertips and all that? The big players, when they're working with MSMEs, they won't know. It's like, I'm sure some of you saw that ad from one of the agencies. The nation wants to know ki ladka nikal gaya ki nahi, type of thing. So, what is your ability to provide a real-time visibility where the order is, where the particular situation is, what are the bottlenecks? So the visibility-led technology, and there are many which provide one outcome. The second is that all of the large players in today's market are competing on doing more with less. So do you have the productivity driving technologies? Can you deliver 5%, 7%, 8% year-on-year productivity gain? So are you working on delivering the same product faster, better? And then the third one, which is very, very specific to the product and service which you're providing, is innovation technologies. How do you continue to change the ecosystem? If you continue to do what you're doing and you are the order taker as an MSME, sorry about that,
yes,
tongue twister, it is harder. But if you continue to innovate, even incrementally, if not transformationally, so there are technologies which allow you to, depending upon the thing. So my suggestion would be to focus on visibility technologies, productivity technologies, and technologies which help you innovate the product or a business model.
Mr. Narayan, we all know the returns on investment when you make investment into technology, for example, knowing your customer better. But are you seeing in your interactions, are you seeing the small players, the small businesses actually moving towards it? Do you see them enthusiastic and wanting to adopt new technology which will help them, be it data, be it technology, to know your customers better?
So let me not say that they're taking leaps and bounds and running at technology. It's the pandemic that is making the technology run to them, right? So human contact has suddenly been taken out of the system, right? And you are very comfortable going over for a cup of tea and saying that, aapka lorry 4 din baad pahunchega, for example. Your lorry is going to reach 5 days later, or the prices have changed. Today, at the end of the day, with the human interaction being out of it, they have to get technologically tied up into the order, into the transaction, right into the extranet or the internet of the customer, where they are able to record these statements. And then what is happening is that customers are handling this much better. Earlier customers used to know 24 hours or 6 hours in advance that their shipments are not reaching. Today, thanks to this technology and the digital footprint that is being laid by every communication, the customer is coming to know 48 hours, 2 weeks in advance that, this material is getting delayed, and he's being able to plan things better. And, finally, it's a cluster of compatriots. Like as SMEs, if SME 1 is doing it, within day 7, SME 2 is starting to do it, because he knows that he's losing cutting edge with his customer and he's losing points, kind of stuff. So the situation is actually, and I think that's the best way SMEs will adapt to technology when they're pushed to it. I mean, at the end of the day, you can take the horse to the pond, but you can't make it drink water. But keep it parched, keep the profits low, and then you see them doing all kinds of things, adopting technology to push up those margins, push up those revenues, etc.
And before I move into the third part of the discussion on policy initiatives, Prakash, you raise your hand, so please make your point.
Yeah, I feel the infrastructure element, what Mr. Narayan also talked about, is very important, because a lot of it is awareness or lack of it. I'll give you example, whether how much it takes me as an SME to set up a website, or whether it is infrastructure, whether it's related to digital payments, or whether it is related to PCs. I'll give you a great example on PCs. The study that we did on PCs says SMEs today, rather than sticking with their old PC, four or more year old PC, with the same amount that they spend, close to 2 lakhs, they can buy 3 modern PCs. So this is a PC oriented dialogue, but infrastructure overall, a lot of it is whether I am aware what value it adds and what costs it really amounts to. Most times SMEs are not aware. So collectively as an industry, I think we need to do much more in terms of making people aware how much it costs, what is the impact.
Yeah, and apart from making them aware, I think in terms of cost, Prakash, you'll agree that they also need to know about the various initiatives and schemes that both corporations and governments keep coming up with on a regular basis. There's a whole plethora of options out there, and I really don't know how many SMEs actually know about all of them, and whether there is a case for a common platform to make these announcements as well. Let us now move to the third and final part of our discussion, which is around the policy initiatives, and who better to start that with than, of course, Dr. Krishnan himself. So, Dr. Krishnan, one of the things that we always notice, like you said, the 58,000 plus compliances brings about a lot of friction between the small enterprise and governments and authority across all levels, right? Whether it's the municipal level or it's the central government. Every level there is this huge friction that happens. Even when GST was introduced, the initial few months was a nightmare, right? And it was quite a difficult time. Now things have improved a lot, but in my interaction with SMEs at the ground level before COVID hit, I had quite a few of them in 6-7 events we did with the SMEs, and they were still saying that there's still a lot of trouble on the GST platform for that they are facing. So there are issues out there, and all these things that are being launched and the task force that you're heading. Is there a better way for the government to take this over? Because of course, this is a hugely voluminous task. Regulations and all that have piled up year after year over 70 years. How do you get rid of the unnecessary of the dead wood? How do you make sure that the laws are relevant to today? How can the government do it easier, faster, so that they can actually help the MSMEs with what they should be doing rather than filing 58,000 compliances? They should be looking to give the SMEs greater access to markets, easier access to credit, right? And easier access to their customers. Is the approach right, you think?
Yeah. I will directly answer your question in just 1 minute. I am now at an age which is, I think, called the anecdote age. I can't but help anecdotage.
Anecdotage.
Yes.
And this is partially in response to a question that you had sort of raised, saying, is this at all doable? I mean, it looks so difficult. Do you remember, some of you perhaps were very small kids then. I was perhaps just leaving school or entering college. There was this gentleman called Swaraj Paul who tried a hostile takeover of escorts and then DCM. This is mid-1980s. He bought an enormous amount of shares of these companies. And do you remember the ground on which the thing did not go through? The ground on which this did not go through was there were these humongous number of trucks with the share transfer certificates that had to be manually signed by the company secretary and then registered for effecting the transfer of shares from X's name to Swaraj Paul's name in the books of the company. And I remember a photograph in the Hindustan Times as a child of trucks parked, snaking their way on the roads right up to the national highway, running into hundreds. Now, come to mid-90s. India decides that we will go, quote unquote, digital in the form of dematerialization of shares. USAID wrote a report in 1995, of which I have a copy and Mr. C.V. Bhave has a copy. There are only 2 copies. And they laughed. They said, you guys want to do something which nobody, I repeat, nobody in the world has done. So don't even try this. What did India do? India wrote a legislation called the Depositories Legislation. It's one of the finest pieces of legislations written by India. Dr. P.J. Nayak, some of you will know him. He retired as CMD of the UTI Bank. He and Mr. M.S. Sahu, current chairperson of the IBBI, Insolvency Bankruptcy Board of India, and Mr. T.K. Vishwanathan, former Secretary General Lok Sabha, the three of them hand wrote this legislation in 3 nights. That legislation got passed. India created a National Securities Depositories Limited, and all the rest of the panelists here know this better than I. Swaraj Paul's shares can today be transferred before I can say hello. Literally, in less than a second, 1 billion shares can be transferred. So, as to your question, can we do it? We have done it. So, and this is not the first time. So, I am very hopeful that India's MSME moment has arrived. And the kind of interest that I saw during this task force, we've interacted with at least 5 chief ministers, because there is growing demand on us to come and please replicate this in our state. The complication here, unlike the example that I gave earlier, this is a center plus state plus local government. You rightly said, right from the municipal inspector to North Block, everybody has a finger in this pie. So this is a slightly more complicated question, but I, going around in my current capacity as an academic, see an enormous amount of interest. My sense is what we are doing in Punjab, which is actually now digitizing a lot of these platforms, and compliances on a digital mode, but reduced. The government of Punjab is now ready to decriminalize 90% of what we've pointed out. The cabinet says, give us a draft legislation. And we are working with Vinny Mahajan, the chief secretary. So my short answer is, it's doable. Clearly, technology will play a huge part. And I think I slightly probably got misunderstood. I'm not saying technology has to wait till we do these legislative changes. No, clearly not. There are a whole bunch of enterprises which need this technology because they are already at some levels of technology adaptation. But for us to make a difference to the 63 million that Suchetana spoke about, we need formalization. And I think we can not only do it, we have a history of doing these very difficult things. And I personally believe we'll be able to do it. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnan. The beauty about that anecdote age is that all of us can listen to you and then pass it off as first-hand knowledge somewhere else. I'll come to Mr. Tuteja. How do you think technology can actually, and government, do you think government policy can bridge the gap between a large company and a small business, and how can it be done?
I started with my talk by saying that there are 3 levelers, and the second one was skill. So I definitely think that the government, the regulator, and many other mechanisms, policy and otherwise, can actually bridge a lot of gap.
So how can the digital gap be bridged between a large company and a small company? Because from this discussion, it's very clear, and of course, we know that it is the digital divide that differentiates the two categories of companies.
Really. Yes, I'm coming to the digital divide. I think it certainly can do. And there are actually examples for us to follow from other parts of the world. I'll come to that. But I would also like to link to the point Dr. Krishnan talked about in the first segment when he said that we seem to know all the problems and we seem to know all the solution, but the gap remains. And I do want to come with my humble opinion, sir, that if just knowing the problem and just knowing the solution could have helped, I would have been 6 kilos lighter. I definitely know that why am I 6 kilos overweight, and I definitely know all these.
You don't look it.
Maybe I have better solutions to hide it, but not eliminate the problem. I definitely know what should I be eating, how much should I be exercising, what I should be doing, but this just the mere knowledge of solution is not the right thing. I think there is also motivation and the enabler required to make those things happen. And that's where I think the government policy can actually act as both motivator as well as enabler, and motivator could be both on positive as well as the negative motivation side of it. I'll kind of bring the example of Germany. Germany has a very significant MSME population and has a significant contribution to the national GDP there. And one of the things which I have learned, which some of these other markets have done, is to provide impetus through providing ability for an easy access to technology, and the, if you use technology, availability of capital as well as credit at a much lower cost. The second way by which it can do is that it can help the consortium creation and provide the impetus for use of technology for a particular type of industry or for a particular type of areas. And of course, we all know that the custom duty and other kind of make a big impact in terms of technology availability. And last but not the least, the programs like Make in India also bring the self-dependence on many of these areas. So these are the 3 or 4 ways by which the government policy can do. There could be also another way, as I said, that there is a second part of the digital divide which comes in, is either the lack of awareness or lack of confidence on using some of those technologies, because you may not know about it or you may be scared to use it. I come across many small businesses, they don't want to go to cloud because they think it's insecure, and but that's not the case. So how does government enable platforms? So I'm happy that Sandeep and his company is working on this digital saksham, or the name which I heard. But government can also work on some of those initiatives to drive awareness, at the same time also drive the ability for people to use those programs more securely, because there are ways by which you can come out with, and I know the government is working on policies with respect to the artificial intelligence. I think we need to have some sort of direction on that. I think the government is working on the policy for IoT and some of those other areas, because technologies like IoT need standardization. I think there is a need for us to bring in standardization on these areas to make it cheaper and more interoperable. So there are several ways by which the government can, and I know is reducing the digital divide between the large and the MSME enterprise.
Yeah, so there's a lot to be done, but they can be done because we have done it before, like Dr. Krishnan says. And I believe Intel, Prakash, you're also part of the Digital Saksham initiative, isn't that right? That's something that you said initially.
Yes.
So, we are almost at the end of our discussion. We're just 3-4 minutes to go. So I will invite any closing comments from Sandeep, Prakash, Shashank. You have not spoken for some time, Mr. Narayan. And then I will invite Suchetna to summarize the discussion.
Let me just jump in with, one of the biggest pieces of infrastructure that the government has built. It's a platform called TREDS in India, right?
Yeah.
It's where banks can compete and lend freely. So the credit growth issue is solved. People availing credit will get very good rates of interest. But, this is where the complete will comes in. I mean, we built that platform and we left it to the public to use it.
Okay.
In stage 2, we said that every company over 500 crores has to use it.
Yeah.
Now, if you go to a 600 crore company and say that, okay, I'm going to supply to you and put your bill on the TREDS platform, the first thing he will tell you is that if you're working with me, my bills should not go on the TREDS platform.
Exactly. The problem why most PSUs are not on TREDS, and that is the large is a large concern for most MSMEs.
Exactly. And today, if you look at your capital requirement of the country, it is broken at 60 and 40. 60% is for capex and 40% is for working capital. And that whole working capital requirement can be wiped out if we get rid of these delayed payment problems. So if this government had a little more will and said that I now have GST, I now have all the infrastructure in place. So as a policy, GST will now publish all invoices on the TREDS platform. There, your credit problem is solved for 40% of the working capital needs, right? So a little bit more will to, not allow escape hatches, but actually use the infrastructure for what we built it is something I would love to see from this government. But otherwise, I think they're doing a phenomenal job.
Super. Sandeep, Prakash, anything you want to say before we close?
Yeah, I think SMEs are the lifeblood. I mean, there's not a question. They're the lifeblood of an economy, driving economy, fueling economy. I think the pandemic has accelerated their shift towards, digital and or technology. I think literacy, giving them access to, these tools in a much more convenient way, more transparency, will give them access to more customers, will give them access to more markets. And I think it will help them grow their revenues. I think it's very plain and simple like that.
Yeah,
Mr. Mali, you're trying to say something, yeah.
Yeah, I want to end with saying, yeah, absolutely. Government and policy is an ongoing journey. There are a lot that has changed, and I completely agree with all the panelists. There is so much more we can do, for sure. But this aspect of public and private partnership, and that's what the Tech Saksham has also taught us, right? All of us can contribute towards making it better, and the awareness of solutions and the impact technology can make in SMEs is a big gap today. Something has been done through initiatives like these, but a lot more can be done. So if we can all stay the course, because this is not going to be a 1-year journey or a 2-year journey, multiple year journey, together we can actually, along with the government, make a big difference on SMEs. And it's such an important segment for the country.
Shashank, anything you want to say before we close?
So, I think everyone made a point around policy, and I think, of course, that is extremely important. But, I think government has done a great job around payments digitization and payments education for the country, right? And that has happened very well in partnership with the industry, right? The government should actually look at replicating that model around financial literacy and education and different areas of digitization that are there, right? The kind of impetus that we have been able to make in digital payments is extremely good, right? But similar education, similar impetus needs to be there towards compliance that is there, towards the credit that is there, and we need to think of these areas holistically and make significant amount of push, right? So there are agencies like NPCI that have been pushing government's agenda forward. We need to think about and see whether we have such institutions present in these areas that can take that agenda forward. If not, then we need to put those together and build a community of the industries, build self-help groups, build self-regulatory organizations, which can then, in partnership with the government, take those agendas forward.
Right. So we've had 1.5 hours of invigorating conversation. So I take this opportunity to quickly sum it up and then invite Alokesh to do the vote of thanks. I'll begin by thanking all of you because, Mr. Tuteja, you really set the tone for today's discussion. As you mentioned, the 3 levelers for small businesses: God, regulator, and technology. Dr. Krishnan, thank you for leaving us richer with all the anecdotes that you shared with us. Thank you very much. And you made a very important point about the need of formalizing a large number of small businesses if India is to increase the contribution of its MSME sector towards its GDP. Something that Mr. Narayanan, you also spoke about. You mentioned how in developing countries, the contribution of the MSMEs is around the 70% mark. In India, it's reduced to the late 20% range. And you spoke about the ways of increasing that contribution. Mr. Malia, thank you for attending the webinar today and speaking about the need for MSMEs to transform themselves technologically, given the environment that we live in now. And Mr. Kumar, you spoke about the need for Indian tech solutions for specific problems that the Indian small businesses face. Mr. Malhotra, thank you for joining and speaking about how technology could help MSMEs better their understanding of their customers, employee collaboration, but more importantly, as you mentioned, and everybody else agreed, that the key to all of this is spreading higher awareness among the small businesses about the advantages of technology. So, Alokesh.
Thank you, Sujetna. Thank you very much for being such a wonderful co-moderator. And thank you to all the panelists. Thank you especially to Sandeep and the MasterCard team for their support in allowing us to create this platform. It's a wonderful platform. We'll have more discussions on this platform going forward. Dr. Krishnan, special thanks to you for sparing time for us. You're such a busy person. It was absolutely an honor and privilege to have you with us on this discussion. Prakash, Narayan, Shashank, Akhilesh, thank you all very, very much for joining us here today. We'll stay in touch with you. Look forward. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.